On this episode of the show, I have with me Emily Long. She's founder and CEO at Edera. We're going to be talking about her journey from HR to tech CEO. We're going to ask her about that and how she actually got there. Was it by design? Did she always want to be a CEO? And now she has a broader view of the company. Obviously, with the HR talent people background, you bring some different attributes to the role. We're going to ask her how that has helped in terms of her being a CEO and her relationship with the CTO and the rest of the tech org in general. And we'll try to see if we can fit in a few more questions for Emily. Thanks for taking the time with us.
Thanks, Amir. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Tell us what you guys do at Edera before we dive in.
Yes, we are a startup that does infrastructure and security. We're kind of at the merging of those two things. And we do isolation, workload management, and we make your essentially managing your infrastructure a lot easier, more cost efficient, and secure by design. So a big premise of what we do is we sit below the Linux kernel. And we actually provide a type 1 hypervisor that allows you to have workload segregation that you can trust. So no more lateral movement, no more living off the land attacks. And so we live as an infrastructure tool that can make developers and security teams happy at the same time. It's kind of rare, but we're hoping to create a really happy relationship between both of those teams and solving problems together.
Fantastic. Okay, let's dive in. I want to actually go back. So obviously I mentioned on the intro, you do have a background outside of tech as a HR professional. I guess people at this point are probably thinking, well, how did she become the CEO? We'll get there. We will navigate that. But I guess just to take us back a little bit, you did spend a number of years within the HR field, holding various roles, different levels of seniority, leadership. I guess talk to us a little bit about that, well, a little bit about your history within that context.
Yeah, I actually got my degree in public accounting and ended up at KPMG, one of the big four accounting firms there. But I had a very short stint in accounting before I ended up in what we'll consider to be like the people teams. I was a campus recruiter, so university recruiting was my first go. Spent 6 or 7 years there. I ended up in resource management, which is like allocating people's time across different professional services teams, and then ended up in core human resources before I ended up doing human resources in tech. So I definitely have a disposition to care about how people work, problem solving, and you learn a lot about a lot of things dealing with people across different disciplines, working in probably the highs of their life, getting new jobs, placing them into new roles, and the lows, dealing with complex HR investigations and people losing their jobs. Like you learn a tremendous amount about human nature, which is what I spent, the majority of my career doing before I ended up in tech.
Absolutely. And I mean, you held some chief operating officer roles before starting your company. What's the dotted line for you from a career in dealing with people from the HR perspective to become a founder? Because that is not a typical path. Just
No.
to call it out, that's pretty unique. So I am curious that dotted line. I mean, you did go down that path, spent a little bit of time as a COO as well, but the leap to founder within a very deep tech as well, what you described.
Yes.
I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a high tolerance for learning and failure, I think is what got me there. Because, you like any skill, you either go to school or you can do it on your own. My co-founders learned how to code in open source and a lot of self-teaching and community involvement. It's no difference when it comes to learning different skills and aptitudes. I think it's uncommon mostly because people have a misconception that soft skills and hard skills are so different. You're either a soft person or you're a hard skilled person. I don't believe that that's necessarily true. You have a predisposition for one or the other. But in my experience, it was more about, I called myself like kind of the human garbage disposal of all things. Like I moved from HR into COO because I was unafraid to take the things people didn't want to do and start to learn them. So, the first thing I picked up before I became a COO was like information security, policy creation, those types of things to get ready for a customer. Things, nobody had time to pick it up. I'm going to go call a CISO friend, learn how to do this stuff and put it together. And then, so it comes from this propensity to be okay to take something you don't know how to do and learn. And that was really what happened to me. So I took enough things that weren't something I had done before, whether that be information security or customer success or post sales. If something needed to get done, I learned. And I think through my ability to understand people, I had great relationships, people who were willing to teach me, people who trusted me, and I trusted them. That kind of exchange of trust and knowledge, it can go in many different ways. And that kind of led me from people to security to operations, and everything in between. And then being a founder, I think again, the propensity to learn and have a high tolerance for making mistakes, you can take on, I think, a lot more risk than maybe other people will. And that's kind of more my personality type.
Hmm.
It wasn't always, but it turned to be that way over time. I have a knack for wanting to be challenged.
I love that. I guess the follow up to that question is you could have potentially joined as a founder of as a COO, as a chief people officer, I guess, as the CEO. Um, did you want that for yourself as you were going through your career? Was that something even on your radar?
Oh no, it wasn't. I think if you were to talk to me 10 years ago, I would have a very different opinion of where I'd land. It was so I think I was a COO twice before stepping into it like a founder and CEO role. You learn a lot about how businesses operate, and I would say just the interworkings of the back end of a business, relationship management across execs. And I think something I learned over I would say all of my career experiences, most notably in tech, is this real lack of people who know how to create a really healthy environment for discussions, disagreements, conflict resolution, like working through problems, safe space to fail and share ideas. And as I started to see, I would say that lack that was in most technical teams, I saw the power of that skill set being really important. So when coming into Edera, my two co-founders are some of the most brilliant women I've ever worked with in my life. Just their technical ability, their innovative spirit. I've never really met people who have that depth, but I think we all came in understanding that those skills should be used and focused on in that way. Create great tech, create great innovations. Don't be distracted by managing like the inner workings of a team. Being a CEO has so much to do with getting all of the departments to work functionally together, whether you're technical or not. So for us to take away the technical focus from these women who create incredible things for society, it's like, why take them away from that when I can help enable them to be even more focused on the thing that we can all benefit from, which is incredible technical creation. So that's kind of like where we got there is really being able to create a very like holistic view of talent, which is like it's the technical and the people together. Like when they asked me to be CEO, they said we want a conductor of an orchestra. If everyone's playing at a different beat, it sounds terrible. But can you make us all play and make something sound beautiful? And that's kind of where or I would say more people disposition skill set really shines.
I love that because I speak to a lot of founders on the show, and a lot of them are not all of them. There's a fair amount that come from a technical background. They could easily be a CTO. They end up being the CEO. They don't act. They don't have experience working in other functions. If they have a career within technology, you came to the table with. I love the example of being the conductor, because I think there's a lot of times there's a lot of those moving parts that are distractions, as you mentioned. When you look at your startup, it's a very technical uh, product that you guys are delivering. Your relationship with technology, what does that look like? And I'm not saying you understand the technology, you're the CEO, you grasp what it does, but from what's happening under the hood, obviously you have a CTO, you have an engineering
Mm-hmm.
team. What is your relationship with them? How does that dynamic play out for you?
It's just deeply respectful. I think anybody who has the ability to take a step back and realize how hard everything is, you can learn to have a deep-seated respect for everything people bring. So I look at what so Alex is our CTO in particular. I look at what she does and what her team, what the engineering team does. And my other co-founder, she's a distinguished engineer. So she's like deeply technical, what she creates. And I have a deep respect for the complexity and intricacy that's involved in pulling that off. And they have the same level of respect for the depth and intricacy of what I pull off, which is making everything work. Everybody show up every day feeling excited and engaged. Me selling, being able to sell. I lead our sales, component right now. Being able to story tell, fundraise, hire great talent, be able to engage and get great talent to be here. And that high degree of respect and trust is what makes it really powerful. Is that I am not afraid to be absolutely schooled by my direct reports and what they do. Like, I hope they just put me to shame on how good they are at what they do, because that's the point, right? And if I'm enabling them to step into their power, like I do with the technical team, I can. And they call me a very technical CEO. And when they say that, the insecure person in me goes, "What? I'm not an engineer." But what I realized is, and I think that they're incredibly thoughtful, empathetic people who you would say that's a soft skill, but where we naturally lean, you can learn the other parts of that. So I've learned a ton about computing and infrastructure and hypervisors and containers and VMs and the ecosystem and the history of computers. Like, all of that stuff is stuff I've learned alongside these people, collectively, like the team, not just my founders, but it's that deep respect where I know that I can trust them to do what they're supposed to do, and they can trust me to do what I'm supposed to do. So I work really well with highly technical people because I'm not trying to know more, but typically people who get to know me understand that what I do is really hard too. And so then you can start to appreciate the complexity of making something work functionally. Because something can work despite its flaws, and something can work because it's a well-oiled machine. And I think in tech, there's quite a lot of unhealthy teams. And some of the things I hear consistently, I was just at a conference, KubeCon EU, most of the conversations are around the politics that are happening inside of people's organizations. I don't feel like I can give feedback on product direction because someone's going to lash out on me, or I'm afraid of my job security because of XYZ. These aren't technical problems. They are in that you're observing something technical, but you're not speaking up because you don't have a supportive environment to do so. That requires a particular skill set to establish a culture that allows you to push back on that type of stuff. And so I think we misunderstand the importance of that. It's deliberate. It takes effort. It doesn't just happen. Good culture doesn't just happen. It's a choice.
I love that. I want to ask a couple questions with the 800-pound gorilla that's sitting in the room. I think everyone is going to either love me for asking or not like me for asking, but I got to ask. I understand. Former engineer, working talent, the reverse. I completely get the viewpoint. Everything you told me tells me you're a business person at heart. You just happen to run a function within people HR. You could have done sales or marketing. You would have still been a business person, and you're doing those functions now. When it comes to technology, I don't know if people, talent, HR leaders always viewed that way, especially in technology industries. Just in general, I don't think they're viewed as business first. They're thought about as function driven first. You're obviously changing that a little bit. So if somebody else within HR or talent or people can look and go, I'm a business person, I'm not defined by that title. I guess talk to us a little bit about that, because I do think there's a dynamic there of thinking it's easier for technical people to learn to run a business because they're really smart, versus non-technical people to learn how the technology works. They don't need to build it. They need to know how it works and how to run the company. I know both sides are going to be upset with that question, but I am curious. I do feel like there is a stigma. So I am curious if you feel that, and what are your views on that?
Oh, absolutely. I had a friend and mentor when I was offered to take my first technical team to manage. I said, well, I'm not technical. And I tell him this all the time. I told him he's one of the reasons it changed my life. He said, you're not technical. He's like, every time you say that, I want you to like flip your hair and almost like sound like kind of this value, like I'm not technical. And it was one of the things where like, well, that's kind of offensive. But at the same time, it shook me because I'm like, because he said, the only reason that you're not technical is you're limiting your ability to learn. And I think part of it was that I was taught as someone who is in the people profession that you don't do tech, and people always say that you're not technical, I'm not, whatever it is, which is just total and utter crap. Like that is a limit we put on ourselves. But I do also think that um, there is a double, I think we in society like to put hard skills up, like technical aptitude, over soft skills as far as complexity is concerned. Like you even mentioned, like because people are smart, engineers are smart, they can run a business. Yeah, they're more apt to probably learn finance or financial models and those types of things. If you're looking at core technical disposition, like the stereotypes, if I'm good at coding, I could be good at understanding finance and business ops. I think that that's a true correlation, but that's not running a business. Running a business is people management. Can you get people to show up to work, do their job, and do it harmoniously, functionally, and get to, outcomes that you need? It doesn't matter if I understand a spreadsheet. It matters if I can get people to do what they need to do and do it together without fighting, without protesting, without leaving, without those types of things involve a really strong people acumen. And engineers are complex people. They have feelings too. And I think that engineers aren't given enough support because they just assume that they're just coders, but they care about their career progression. Engineers care about being in the middle of decision making and having strategic influence. And I think a lot of times they're passed up and not asked those questions. And I am very eager to understand that from the engineering org. So I think when you start to really appreciate that the stereotypes they exist for a reason. HR has a bad rap sometimes about being only for the business and they're not here for the people. That's a huge reason why I stayed in HR. Yeah, you're right. I could have been in sales and in marketing, those types of things too, and learned that acumen. But I have a very strong feeling of like redefining human resources for the human. I think you can show up for the business and human at the same time. I think you can. And it's about being honest about the problems you're trying to solve. But I think a lot of people do it wrong. And so you're going to judge someone who's in HR recruiting as someone who can't do this, or you're going to judge engineers as these, very literal tactical thinkers. And they can just teach them to run a business. But running an effective business is about understanding people, I would say, more than anything. And when you give engineers the opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings and give them an opportunity to grow in their career, both management, technical skill, like there's so much there. And I think it's just completely and utterly misunderstood. So I would say you can do both if you're willing to learn. And I think we've decided that one skill can be learned and one can't for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I think it's just because it's been normalized. Particularly, I would say in the VC ecosystem, people like to fund a certain disposition or an archetype. And, when we start to see things differently, I mean, like by all accounts, our company had a less than 2% chance of existing just because we are female founded, right? Statistically, very improbable. But we're here and we're doing really cool tech and it has nothing to do with our, gender identities. But, the industry says that it does sometimes just by the mere stats behind it. So that's kind of like how I see it is it's all in front of you to be learned if you want to take it. As long as we are all willing to challenge the stereotypes that we have all accepted. And that to me is kind of an us question. Am I willing to challenge the stereotype? Am I willing to believe that I can learn a deeply technical product as an HR professional? Am I willing as an engineer to appreciate the complexity that soft skills provides? And if the answer is yes, you're going to learn a whole lot about a lot of really complicated stuff around you and your world's going to open up.
That's fantastic, by the way. I love that. You and I are on the same page. I do think it's interesting. You are right. You see certain types of companies funded, especially with the notion of keep the core people as the execution side. They're all technical. That helps the company because you put more technical minds to solve problems. I get it. There's also something to be said about the execution of the business, running a business that requires a different skill set. And sometimes I've had episodes where we've talked about, can the founder be the CEO? Because there sometimes is a gap of ability of growing into that role. I think that those are two different skill sets, founder and CEO. You obviously you hold both those titles. I guess when you look at the ecosystem and you look at yourself, is there a point in which you would look at let's say the company keeps just progressing? Is there a time when you look at yourself and go, maybe you're not the right person to keep the company past a certain size? Is there thought that occurs that you might need someone else to help scale at some point, or is it a case of you generally can learn to scale a company if you are, as you've alluded to, an active learner, you're paying attention, you have mentors. Is that scaling component, is it just natural to some people, or is it something you can learn?
I think you can learn it. However, I I tell people this a lot. It's like just because you can doesn't mean you should. I think it's a very different experience going from like 0 to 1 million, 1 to 10 or 10 plus. Like I've been in all the way in, KPMG 30,000 person company to founding a company and everywhere in between the smattering. It's just a different job. And I think a lot of it, whether or not you're willing to learn it, is am I enjoying it? Do I feel like I'm bringing the right energy to this equation? Because like when you get to a certain point, like your board dynamics change. Uh, and that's just natural. Like you can control the type of people you have on your board depending on how you're fundraising. Like, are they a similar disposition to me? Sure. But the priorities, the metrics you're trying to hit, the scaling incentives change. And so will there be a point, assuming great success, where I get to a point where I say somebody else is the right scaler? Yeah, that could very well be the case. I would love to push myself to continue to do it so long as I'm enjoying it along the way. Like not everything's going to be enjoyable. I don't believe in like, rainbows and lollipops everywhere. But I do think it's a question of just because you can doesn't mean you should sometimes with that. So I think it's very situationally dependent. Because I think if you are hyper scaling and it comes to be more you're managing off spreadsheets and it's very much more like EBITDA, rule of 40, SaaS magic number, and you don't want to live in those types of metrics that drive a lot of the decision making, I think you're not going to have as much fun than the creating and innovating phase. I think you see that a lot where founders will step down and bring CEOs on. I think that that's natural because again, it's where people like to be. But I do think you also see people who are founders and CEOs for the lifetime of their company. In a perfect world, that would be me, because I would love to continue to learn and grow with the team. But I am unafraid to look and be like, I shouldn't be in this room, like this is not me anymore. And I think that there's a indefinite amount of cool things to do in the world. So I always think it's good to level set on yourself. So I'm not sure if that's like a
Fantastic.
direct answer, but I feel like it's, you got to know yourself.
No, I love it. That's a great answer. And maybe final question. You obviously went through a lot of different positions, different roles within companies. A lot of it, obviously, HR focus. We talked about that. And knowing what you know now, I guess this is maybe a two-part question. I was going to ask you, would you have jumped sooner to move, moving into this dynamic? I'm not saying into a founder or CEO role, but into this dynamic of something completely a little bit, different than what you've done. And if so, maybe is there something you would have done to have helped accelerate that move? Because obviously you have the aptitude. It's very clear. Is it a case if you had to go through those experiences no matter what to get to this point, or could you have made that jump a little sooner and what would have been the impetus to make that happen?
Yeah, I think I led with talking about my appetite for failure and like making mistakes and all that type of stuff. I grew into that persona after I ended up in tech. And I was afraid. I was at KPMG for 12 years. I mean, I took different roles, but it was my safety zone. I knew everyone. I grew up there. I was an intern in college, and then I started there for a long time. I think I was hedging for safety and security over risk taking, and I would say like, creative freedom and those types of things at the time. And knowing what I know now, I don't want to say I regret any of the things I did at KPMG because I don't. I made incredible relationships with friends, learned a lot. It taught me how to work hard. But I probably could have left a few years earlier and started this learning journey earlier than I did. And I think that the only way to do that is to be open to just being so deeply uncomfortable. And I don't know in the person I am that I would have been ready to do that any sooner than I was. But if I could go back to my younger self and be like, don't worry about it. You're going to fall on your face, but you're going to be fine. I think that I would have loved to have done that a little bit earlier in my career. But, I think we still plenty of time, still plenty of movement out there. But absolutely, I think But part of it, again, like any of this, you have to be willing to embarrass yourself. You just do. You're going to be wrong. You're going to mess up. You're going to say the wrong thing, particularly if you're trying to learn a whole new discipline. And you have to have a sense of humor, laugh at yourself constantly. But if you can learn really fast. You can adapt really fast. So I would have loved to have done that earlier. I just don't think my personality, I don't think I was ready until I was ready. But if people are on the edge, I would say try to push yourself if you can, because there's so much cool stuff out there as long as you're willing to take a risk.
Fantastic, Emily. I appreciate all the thoughts, very unique views and backgrounds. So I think I love the fact that we're able to share it. If somebody does have a question, they'd want to follow up and maybe pick your brain on because they might want to do something a little bit different than where they are at currently. What is a good way of maybe connecting with you and asking you that question?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as my primary social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Emily Long there. And then anytime you want to find me, edera.dev, we've got a contact us page there too. So if you're interested in what we're doing or you want to find me there, you can also go through some and we'll flag me down. So those are the two places you can find me.
Fantastic, Emily. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Amir. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely. All right, that's this episode. We'll be back again for the different guests and different topic. Until then, two things. One, I do love journey stories, and I really loved Emily's because really resonated with me. Her move from HR to a tech co-founder and CEO. I think she explained how that really works for her and all those experiences that have given her all that business acumen and how she partners with the technology side. And she's a risk taker. I love that. I mean, obviously, I think everyone who's listening to this can take a little bit away from that and share it with somebody else who can also benefit from hearing Emily's story. I'd appreciate that greatly. Also, like, subscribe, and comment. Leave me a review on the show. Love to hear from you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.